Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So yet again, I'm finding myself here with the kind gentleman, Bronson Keith from The Meat Life. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Morning to you, evening to me, right?
It's currently 1:05, so I mean, I'm still working on coffee, so it's in the AM, right?
Yeah.
So I'm actually really interested in having a chat to you today about your perspective on performance within an ancestral health diet. So, you know, what you do with either yourself, your clients, or what you recommend to people in order to get the most out of their physical performance in, a meat-based, low glycemic load diet.
Right. Just in general. So performance being physical, the ability to do physical activity at a high intensity or long term. Like, so it's really an interesting question because everybody has different performance goals. So I would work with people who are runners. I work with people who just want to be fit, whatever that means, because that means, again, different things for different people. And I work with people that want to be strong people. So there's a lot of different aspects to what performance means. So what I like to do is I generalize, and I get this concept is really, it's nothing new, but CrossFit has made a really good way of packaging what fitness is in the terms of fitness is the ability to do work, right? If you increase your capacity to do work, you are then more fit. So it's as simple as that, right? The ability to move weight a certain distance over time. That's what we're talking about. Whether that weight is your body weight over 5K or that 180 pounds in a clean and jerk, and you're only going 3 feet up and down in the air. So it's still the same thing. How much work can you do in a certain amount of time? Or how much time can you put into work and continue that work at a consistent pace through that time?
I think that's really interesting because I think, there are different camps that form within the fitness industry where, you tend to have people who are like, oh, I'm a bodybuilder, and you kind of focus on that exclusively. Or people say like, oh, I'm a CrossFitter, and you like focus on that exclusively.
Yep.
And like it's almost becomes like two brothers and sisters kind of like bickering backwards and forth between each other. Sure. But in the reality is that, when you do break it down into, work capacity over time, progressing in either of the two modalities is really about just increasing your total work capacity.
Sure.
Sorry.
Okay. And as I say, and there's a different effect of both. They both have a focus, but they both overlap in the results. So I focus on increasing my work capacity, my functional strength, my maximal strength. I will see some effect in body composition and larger muscles, right? But at a lower percentage than if I focus on larger muscles and body composition, I will see some lower effect in overall strength. So like you said, they're brother and sister, they kind of work together, and there is a different way to focus on each or to get the best of both worlds in each.
I think what that really summarizes is the SAID principle, the specific adaptation to impose demand. And I'd say that in CrossFit, it's more about having a cross-modality focus. So you're focusing on not having a focus, and in some ways, I think a lot of bodybuilders will turn around and say that because you're not applying a specific demand across the results that you get in general are suboptimal. And to be honest, if your sole focus is on one particular modality or another, say whether that's strength or, cardiovascular capacity or something like that, then yeah, absolutely, you're right. Yep. You probably would be better off being more specific. But then also, as you said earlier before, that's not everyone's goals.
That's not everyone's goal. And I think the I don't even know what the right word is, the miscommunication or the misunderstanding, or not even the misunderstanding, the variation of what people define as fitness themselves is different than what, in my opinion, what fitness is. Right? Yeah. I firmly believe that fitness is, if you take the idea of work capacity over time, if you take that to another little higher level, it's the ability of your body to handle a variety of stresses in any circumstance, right? So to me, that means there are a multitude of modalities, a multitude of intensities, a multitude of weights, and there's just so many different aspects to go into that. So if you focus on any one aspect of a sport or exercise, then you are missing out on other aspects of what I would determine as fitness.
Absolutely.
So, and it's a very controversial statement, but it's been said, and I firmly agree that anyone who is a world-class athlete in a specific sport is probably not as fit as somebody who is a fairly good athlete in a functional fitness program. Right. So someone who is Mr. Universe, right? You take Mr. Universe, right? They're huge, they're ripped, they're strong as hell, they got all this kind of stuff. But have you ever seen them do a 5-minute high intensity workout? Because they will die.
Yeah, and to be fair, like if you throw some of those guys at a Metcon, they're going to be in a world of hurt. And some of those guys are puffed going up a flight of stairs.
Right, exactly. So that's I think where my challenge in what I do, helping people get fit, is balancing the expectations of what people see in their mind or see in their eye as what fitness is versus what it actually is and how it applies to their life. So there's a difference between looking like you're fit and actually being fit. So I tell people all the time that if you get fit, you will look like it. If you try to look like you're fit, you won't necessarily be fit.
And as the caveat I'd say to that is that, if you're training, let's say a strength specific training program, so something that I would employ for bodybuilding, and you're doing it at a high enough intensity, the chances are, you are going to get some cross modality improvements. So like, if you are doing a deadlift to failure, you are going to be doing cardio as well.
Yes.
There is no way you're getting around that, but it's less specific in that, in the cardio capacity. So of course my cardio capacity is going to be lower than someone who does Metcons.
Absolutely. It's a varying degree kind of thing. And it doesn't mean, and I think that's where the contention comes from, right? So someone like me who's saying bodybuilders aren't fit. I'm not saying that they're not in pretty good shape, right? I'm not saying that they're not doing something that's active. They're not doing something that's going to make their body better. There is value in other areas of fitness that they're getting. They're just focusing the larger majority on one or two aspects of that. Right? So if we look at fitness being the 10 components of fitness, I don't know if you've heard that, right?
Yeah. Agility
and speed,
flexibility, etc. Yeah.
Flexibility, endurance, and all of those, right? I always forget one of them. I always forget balance for some reason. I always forget that's one of them.
Proprioception.
Yeah, I get to 9 and then I'm like, where is that last one?
Yeah.
So, they focus on that end. An elite runner focuses on endurance and stamina and cardiovascular health. That's their primary. So they're leaving out some of the strength stuff. They're leaving out some of the flexibility stuff. Have you ever seen the flexibility of a runner? It's non-existent. Right?
Yeah.
So they're missing out on those total aspects of fitness.
So I'm actually really interested to, sorry to interrupt, you go.
No.
Okay. I'm actually really interested to pick your brain about the specificity principle I mentioned before, specific adaptation to impose demand. So if we accept the fact that CrossFit and the style of training that you would employ to improve performance is by definition non-specific, how do you improve someone's specific work capacity over time? Like if you're not specifically trying to improve your bench press, as an example, and tracking that progress, how do you have progressive overload?
So now we're getting it. Now we're going to not talk about muscle building at all right now.
We'll get into that. I at the moment, okay.
So that's where the whole idea of varied modalities and intensities comes into play. So within the model that I use, I follow kind of a combination so there's, in the powerlifting world, there's two competing styles of thought. Even though they're similar, they're not. Conjugate method, which West barbell, right? Okay, variations of movement. You're not going to squat, you're not going to deadlift, you're not going to bench, but you're going to do variations of squat and deadlift and bench. And you're going to do a lot of accessory work, and you're going to do a lot of speed and power work. And those are all things that help you develop your strength, and the central nervous system activation of what you're doing, so that when you do actually get into there and squat and bench and deadlift, you'll be stronger. And then you have US powerlifting, USA powerlifting, who they're the complete opposite, and they are of the mindset that squat, bench, and deadlift are skills, and you must practice those skills. And they follow what's called undulating periodization. So both of those methodologies have different applications, but they still use the same kind of method of varied focus and supercompensation.
Yeah.
So, right. So one day you're going to come in and you're going to do some heavy squats, right? The next day, I'm not doing heavy squats, right? I'm going to let my body rest. Maybe for 2 days, I don't do anything heavy for legs. Maybe I do bench press the next day. Maybe I do some hypertrophy, higher rep stuff for deadlift the third day. And then I do something for legs on the fourth day, right? So there's that variation. So the combination of two types of hypertrophy, which we can get into in a minute, as far as how you're going to build muscle or mass, muscle or mass, because they are two different things. And letting your body rest and recover, so that, so you give me that look, so that your body can actually recover and come back at a higher level than what you were when you first started training.
And I think just some thoughts that came to mind as you were talking, where when you're talking about the conjugate method versus more of like a overall strength method. Within like bodybuilding world, I suppose we'd probably refer to that as the difference between rate of perceived exertion, so RPE, versus perceived reps remaining. So like with an RPE, you're not really caring so much about what you're actually lifting. What you're focusing on is what the perceived intensity is, right? And it's using like autonomic regulation to be able to control your intensity. And the idea is that if you're training at a high enough intensity, you'll adapt, and then what you're actually lifting would progress over time.
Right.
And I think for the most part, that's what a lot of CrossFitters will use. They'll use like I worked out at a 9 out of 10. And as long as you're doing that over enough time, you would improve.
So not good CrossFitters, actually.
Good. Okay. No, that's actually really good, because I actually have a problem with RPE as a general rule.
Yeah. So in actuality, and this is one of the things I think that a lot of people don't know or don't understand about CrossFit in general, and we're not talking about specifically CrossFit, but this is my philosophy on anything: nutrition, fitness, life, whatever it is, right? You have to benchmark. You have to have some way that you can actually gauge and give yourself a number to say, here's what I did before, here's what I've done, and then here's what I'm doing now. So one of the hallmarks of the CrossFit methodology is benchmarking, right? So we have a ton of different workouts that have just kind of evolved over the past 10 years that we use as benchmarks. And then there's even beyond that, right? So there are a ton of dozen apps that you can use where you can track your workouts. For instance, at my gym, we have an app called SugarWOD. Every day we do a workout. We tell people, put the weight you did, put the reps you did, put the movement you did. If you scaled or modified, put that in your notes. So the next time something similar comes up, you know what your reference point is. And then if we've done a workout before, we have a ton of workouts that we do some sort of benchmark workout at least once a week at our gym, right? So we're always, in that workout, we may have done this workout 3 or 4 months ago, but we're going to do that now and say, hey, where were you? We've done some things and how. So it's very, very much in a managed, progressive, effective program. You have to track what you're doing for workouts.
Absolutely. And I think with those, they're kind of like snapshots, and in between you are using that autonomic regulation to be able to control what your intensity is. And then you're seeing with those snapshots, whether or not you've progressed. I think what I would generally recommend for people who are being a little bit more specific, I think, with their training methodology would be to, rather than having individual snapshots, and they can actually be, useful to have a benchmark if you're doing things like 1RM testing and things like that, but to actually track every single workout and every single set that you're doing with perceived reps remaining. So for example, if I know that I could bench, let's just say 80 kilos for 6 reps and I had 1 rep left in the tank, if I can do those same 6 reps the week after and I'm like, you know what, I probably had 2 or 3 reps left in the tank, then that marks that set for progression for future workouts. Okay. And then we can look at different modalities and ways of controlling it, whether reverse pyramid training, or you want to do 5x5, you want to do all of these things. But if you cut back all of the the methods that sits on top of it, what it's really based on is the idea that over time you are increasing your work capacity, exactly as you said, by ensuring that your intensity is greater than what it was previously. Sorry, not your intensity, your total work completed.
Right, and I think that's probably easier to do in a bodybuilding environment or that style of workout, because you're only working one thing at a time. Yeah, it's harder to do RP, perceived remaining when you've got 4 or 5 movements in a Metcon and you've been doing it for 20 minutes. You're like, I don't know what I have left in the tank there, right? Like,
I'm just moving. Like, what do you want from me?
Right now, there's no way, right? But I totally get that. And like I said, no matter what you do, if you're doing something, you're going to see progress at some level across all 10 aspects of fitness, right? In most cases. In some cases, you won't see any. Like in running, if you're not doing any, let me take this back. Let me take that whole statement back. In most cases, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing something that is a well-rounded program, you will improve some aspect of all 10 components of fitness. Okay. If you're a runner and you're not stretching, then you won't see an improvement in flexibility. If all you ever do is run, then you'll be great. You'll have bad knees, bad back, bad ankles, and tons of other things, but you'll be a really fast runner who isn't flexible.
And to be fair though, their flexibility is probably going to be better off than someone who just sits at a desk and does nothing. So, running is still going to improve. But the fact is that is it enough? Like, exactly you said, at what point across the 10 modalities do you turn around and say, this is the standard I'm willing to accept for flexibility. This is the standard I'm willing to accept for power development. This is the standard I'm willing to accept.
Absolutely. And that's a completely personal question that only each person can answer for themselves.
Absolutely. So I make no secret that my sole focus is about improving body composition. That is my passion. So I'd really like to pick your brain about how you would approach improving particularly lean body mass within, like different training modalities, and in particular within like an ancestral health diet.
Sure. Well, we basically listened to the first video that we did, right? As far as what you're eating, that's pretty much the way to go, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to maintain an ancestral diet, which is, low to no carbs, moderate to low fat, and high protein, kind of that way, because that can be different for each person.
Yeah.
And you're going to be looking at, a good amount of protein, and you've got to work yourself. You've got to work your muscles. You've got to get out there and do something that's going to increase and this is something that I really wish we had a test on people that were on ancestral diets, right? Because there is a difference. We'll go back to what I said earlier. There is a difference between gaining muscle mass and gaining muscle.
Okay.
So if you look at, and I always get these words mixed up, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, okay?
That is hyperplasia,
taking the muscle fiber and you're increasing the fluid. You're making that muscle fiber bigger, but you're not necessarily making it stronger, right? The building blocks of that muscle fiber haven't increased. You're filling it, you're increasing the plasma, you're increasing the size of that fiber. So you get bigger muscles, right? So when most of the time we talk about hypertrophy, that's what we're talking about. I'm going to do some hypertrophy work today. Okay, I'm working in anywhere from a 10 rep to 15 rep range. I'm doing a whole bunch of sets. I'm getting that pump. Right? I feel like after the workout, I feel like I'm Arnold on my way out the door. I got to go out sideways, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. And that is size over strength. Now, there's going to be some impact in developing a strength.
Mm-hmm.
You're still taxing your muscle. There's still progressive overload. You're still going to add building blocks, right? You're still eating protein. Your body's still going to say, hey, let's get some of those things in there. But the percentage is way skewed towards size. Then you have maximal strength work, which is myofibular hypertrophy.
Yep.
I said that right. I would say myofibular for some reason. I don't know why. And that is where we're essentially, without getting too complicated, we're essentially adding building blocks, right? We're adding pieces to the muscle. So you can almost say you're adding muscle fibers to that strand is one way to put it, okay? So you're actually increasing the tensile strength of the muscle without necessarily making the muscle bigger, right? So you're stronger, but you may not be bigger. Now, there will be some size because you still are technically adding to the muscle.
Yes.
Right? But it's not the same as the other way. I equate it to, have you ever gotten a pack of sponges?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
they're all smushed down when they're dry, and then you put water on them, and they kind of just really get really big. Okay. Take one of those sponges, fill it with water, it's huge. Okay. That is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy.
Yep.
Okay. Take 2 or 3 of those sponges, don't put any water on them, smash them together. That is myofibular.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So you have the same amount of space, but they're stronger because you now have more of them in that space. As a one strand. Really big. So having the 2 of those in a mix, there's nothing wrong with either one, right? Mix it up, right? And that's why I like what I do is I'll have a couple of days a week where I do max strength work, and I have a couple of days a week where I do the hypertrophy work where I'm trying to get some size.
So,
and both of those are useful. Both of those are useful.
So I've read some really interesting research, and you know, when it comes to training, I tend to be a little bit skeptical towards the research that comes from it, just because it's one of those things where it looks great on paper, but how does it actually play out in real life? Which sounds odd for me considering I'm a science nerd, and if it's not in papers, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and there's always questions. How long did they do it? What were they eating? What were they actually doing? How hard were they working?
But from the research that I've been able to read, essentially what it's saying is that hypertrophy, not hyperplasia, but hypertrophy, whether it's sarcoplasmic or not, is largely based on the total work completed over a week in particular. You're looking at about 20 sets of anywhere between 5 to 15 reps, taken to within about 1 or 2 reps of failure for every set per week, of being pretty much ideal. So it'll be a trade-off then between frequency versus total volume per workout. So if you've got to do 20 sets in the vicinity of failure within a weekly period, you know, you could do 5 workouts at 4 sets, or you could do 2 workouts at 10 sets. You know what I mean? And it balances out. And essentially what you find is that there is an inverse square, where as you increase the amount of work completed, it tends to peak at around 20 sets. So between about 15 and 22 sets to failure seems to be about the ideal to get the most amount of hypertrophy. Where if you do less than that, you're getting suboptimal. And if you go beyond about 22 sets, that's when you actually start going backwards, and you're actually doing more harm than good, and you'd be better off just getting out of the gym and, you know, recovering. So what I found really interesting with that was that with that research, it seems like if you're doing exclusively in the 3 to 5 rep range, the hypertrophy that you get tends to be actually a little bit less than what if you're doing predominantly in the, say, 10 to 15 rep range. However, the strength gains that you get are about on par with what you'd get if you were doing, in terms of total 1RM, I mean, it would be on par what you'd get if you were doing those 20 sets in the 10 to 15 range.
And I would agree with that in anybody that is I would say from an untrained to moderately experienced athlete.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we're talking about, as you get more specific, you need to be more specific with the, the
Right.
demand that you're placing on your body.
Right.
But what I have issues with that is the difference between a lab setting versus the real life.
Sure.
So for example, if you ask someone to do a 15 rep set, I guarantee you they're not picking a weight where 15 reps is actually their true 1RM failure.
Right.
Because it hurts, and most people would just
Yeah.
like, no, this fucking sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. And they'll stop early.
Yeah, I mean, are you doing a workout in a lab versus, what you're trying to do to get ready for a show or something, or a competition or whatever? I mean, it's two different things.
Exactly. Versus if you're doing in like the 5 to 6 rep range, you're actually much more likely to actually be lifting at a true, 90% 1RM than if you were doing a higher rep range. So in that way, that I find that in the real world, if you want to improve your strength, you are actually better off using a lower rep range, just simply because most trainees won't actually work hard enough in a higher rep range to get a strength gain out of it.
Yep.
Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, and I think I can't say that it equates necessarily to the pain of or the discomfort of doing a higher rep range. I think there are plenty of low rep range workouts that hurt just as much.
Yeah.
So, and then you've also got the aspect of the different styles of working out, right? So if we're talking about just lifting, right? And this is one of the other pieces that goes into the variety of what we do in my program, is we get max effort work and we get hypertrophy work in our metcons. So I may have a metcon that is, you're going to do some pull-ups, some jump rope, and then you're going to do 70%, 75% rep deadlifts. And then you can do some pull-ups and jump rope, and then do, and you're going to do that 4 or 5 times, right? So you're getting max effort work while you're already building up lactic. You're already working your aerobic, like you're doing a bunch of other things at the same time. So there's other things in my realm that play into where people are at with that as well. So I think in general, yes, it's easier to build strength at lower reps. For a multitude of reasons. I think a combination of one, just because it builds strength. The central nervous system is another aspect.
Yes.
It needs to get used to doing things heavy if you want to do things heavy.
And that is the benefit of, what you were talking before about the USA powerlifting method, is that if you're doing the exercise, you're constantly entraining that movement pattern into your brain. Right. So the CNS is primed to do it.
Exactly. So yes, I think that the science shows that for most people, and I say this all the time, if you're new, just do something. Right? Yeah. Because you're going to get benefit from it. I don't care if you've never done anything before, join a bodybuilding gym, join a boxing gym, join a Zumba class. I don't care. Do something. You're going to see some benefit, right?
Burn some ATP.
Yeah. The longer you do stuff, the more you're going to advance and be more specific. So for someone who may say, hey, I've been doing this for a while, I'm not seeing the strength gains, you may need to switch into something where you're doing more max effort work. Right? For someone who's maybe been doing max effort work and is, I'm not getting as big as I want to get, maybe you need to start throwing in some more hypertrophy work and mix it up, right? Get a little bit of both. So in that case, I say for strength gains, definitely make sure you're doing max effort work, low rep stuff. Make sure that you are practicing the movements and getting the movements in that you need to make your central nervous system perform them more optimally. And then do them under stress, right? I'm not saying do them to a point where you're going to hurt yourself, but I really believe that from a central nervous system perspective, from a mental perspective, I know, and this is one of the cool things that has happened over the past couple of years, and some of the things that CrossFit has done, is they've designed some workouts that are really tricky in the way that they get the body working. And we'll do something like 9 minutes of double unders and I don't know, double unders and burpees, right? As many rounds as possible, maybe, 30 double unders, 10 burpees, back and forth as many times as possible in 9 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then then you rest for 2 minutes and then you have 4 minutes to get a 1 rep max power clean. Okay. And people are like, what in the world?
So 2 minute rest with 3 minutes, 50 seconds of extra rest and then what?
And then you go, right? So you'll have people, they'll warm up a little bit, they'll put some stuff on there. But the cool thing about it is without fail,
Mm-hmm.
most of the people set new PRs in their clean. Right? Their body there's just something mentally, they're like, I can't even explain what the psychology is behind it.
Yeah.
But then physiologically as well, it's a completely different energy system now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You burn out everything over here. Your body's like, okay, I got all this energy over here to do something completely different. It's not based on my heart now. It's all ATP. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I've had 2 minutes to rest. Like it's there and your body is just ready to go.
So, yeah. And I think doing super high intensity stuff, you definitely, you're getting adrenaline or norepinephrine, pumping through your system, you're getting the focus.
Yeah.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of the time, strength work is about that mental state. When you walk into the gym, are you literally telling yourself that I am an animal and I'm going to destroy this workout? And if you're not, then, maybe that's probably what you should be doing.
Yeah. If you're not uncomfortable doing strength work, you're not doing strength.
Wholeheartedly agree. And everyone has different things that, gets them going. For me, I just love being the freak in the gym that everyone's like, where the girls are looking at and going, looking at me with in disgust, and the guys are looking at, pure sheer terror,
Yeah,
but,
right. Who is that?
Whatever gets you going, if that's angry music or, who knows, right?
Yep.
But you said something really interesting before that I wanted to pick up on. You were talking about how people were saying that, if they weren't getting the results that they were after, that they probably needed to pick up their training intensity. But I find that for the most part, when people are like, oh, I'm not, especially on an ancestral health diet, so like carnivore or keto or whatever, they're like, oh, well, I can't gain muscle on keto. So, I obviously need to like smash the carbohydrates. Talk to me about that.
Okay. The first thing is, regardless of, I'm going to talk about the nutrition piece in a second.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not gaining weight or you're not gaining muscle,
mm-hmm.
I would highly recommend that the first thing you do is look at your training program.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Don't look at trying to change your whole lifestyle, right? Until you know that the plan you're following, hopefully you're not making it up yourself unless you've been trained.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you have a coach or you're working with somebody who knows what's going on and is listening to, 1, your goals, and then 2, understands where you are and what you're doing in your lifestyle to make sure they're giving you a plan that fits.
Yeah.
Okay. Too often I see trainers and people who just give a plan and then that's what the plan is and they're going to go, right?
Or even the same plan that they gave out to like 8 other clients last week.
Right. And didn't modify it at all, right? So, I mean, now don't get me wrong, templates are great,
mm-hmm.
but templates, that's a starting point that then gets adjusted based on the person that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of, anyways.
Yeah.
So,
don't get me wrong. Like, I'll be back over there, right, doing another fucking rant video about trainers at this rate. So anyway, please continue.
Right. So, make sure your plan is actually designed for you to get where you want to be. So that I'll just leave that. That's a whole nother video we could do.
So just to summarize on that one before you do get onto the nutrition piece, essentially the way I'm hearing what you're saying is it doesn't matter. Being strong doesn't necessarily mean that you are growing. However, being stronger than what you were previously does. If you are increasing it over time, then you are going to grow.
Yes.
And if your training program isn't improving your strength over time, then you probably need to look at that part of the puzzle more than you do the nutrition. Is that about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. And again, based on your goals, somebody like you may not really have a strength goal. You may have a size goal. right? Maybe you may go to the gym every day, measure your biceps and go, nope, I got to add an inch. Whatever whatever.
You're talking about, I'm running out of tape.
Yeah. Okay.
Kidding.
It wouldn't surprise me. As much as you eat, I can see that. And as much as you work out, right?
Yeah.
So whatever your goal is, if you're not making progress towards your goal, then look at your training plan first. If you don't have a training plan, then get one.
Yep. Or a coach.
Can give you one. Right. All right. So that being said, the biggest thing that I find with people who are saying that they're not making progress, and I'm not going to say gaining size, getting stronger, whatever, because that, whatever that goal is, whatever. Some people it's endurance, some people it's stamina, some people it's just being able to get through a workout, right? So the biggest thing that I found for people who are having trouble making progress in their fitness activities has been not being patient enough and letting themselves adapt. So I basically tell people that there are, depending on your level of experience and your level of physical activity, there can be anywhere from 2 to 3 levels of adaptation, right? And there's probably more based on the person, what they're doing, but just in general, if you have what I call lifestyle adaptation, activity, general activity, physical activity, and then high intensity workouts or high intensity activity, right? So it may take a week to 2 weeks for someone to get lifestyle adapted to a fat heavy diet. That same person, if they are working out regularly, it may take them a month to 5 or 6 weeks for their workout, their general workouts it may even take longer for them to really start feeling like they're getting something out of their workouts and they're not dying trying to get through their workouts. For somebody who's really high level and works out 4, 5, 6 days a week, maybe does 2 a days, or maybe is mixing up and doing a bunch of different things. Maybe they're endurance, maybe they do triathlons, or maybe they do CrossFit competitions, things like that. It could take them 2 months or more, right? To really see, not just to see, okay, this is working, but to see improvement in their performance, right? So, and that's what I'm talking about. So just for me as an example, I was kind of low carb when I started carnivore, but it was a good 7 to 9 days. I felt like crap. Just in general when I first
I had the same experience.
Right.
Which surprised me. I really didn't see that coming.
Yeah. And I knew kind of that it was probably going to happen, but I wasn't really expecting it.
So this is a bit of a dalliance on the subject before we get back into, diet for muscle gain. But in your opinion, what do you reckon the cause of that is? Like that weird carnivore kind of adaptation. Yeah. Well, not the keto flu, just the change between carnivore and keto.
I think it's the same thing. I just think it's because you're taking it to the nth level, right? Your body. I think it's kind of like a smoker who hangs out with people who smoke. I'm trying to quit, but I'm going to hang out with people who smoke. I get the secondhand smoke. I get the feeling about it. I get to see it. I get to smell it. I get to, all that stuff. But the minute they stop is the real change. That's when the real adaptation kicks in. Yeah. And that's kind of how it's an analogy that I just came up with, actually.
Yeah. You can take that one right to the bank.
So I think it's just another level, right? You're adapted to the level of fuel that you give your body. When you remove that fuel for that final amount and you stop taking it completely, your body just has to adapt to another level.
So, obviously there is nothing in the literature realistically about carnivore diets. And I'm sorry that work of Stephenson is not literature. That's an anecdote. Great story, but it's an anecdote, Yeah,
it goes into the data. It goes into the data cache. That's about it. Yeah,
exactly. So I actually think it has a lot more to do with the fact that when you're on a ketogenic diet, most people tend to have a much higher fat intake. And even when I was on keto, I was much the same. I probably wouldn't go higher than approximately 40 to 50% protein, in terms of total caloric intake. versus carnivore, you know, you're automatically at that kind of level almost by extension right off the bat. And I think it's actually the fact that when you do go to like a carnivorous based version of an ancestral health diet, there is that substrate change between using predominantly fat to all of a sudden you've actually now got all this amino acids that your body can actually start to use to oxidize, to, you know, start doing all of these different functions that previously when you were restricting protein probably wasn't getting a chance to do.
So when you were keto, you were lower protein?
I was high protein keto, which is still what I would consider low protein compared to what I eat now.
Okay.
So, you know, I would consider, I mean, I probably got up to about as high as 40, maybe 50% of my calories coming from protein, which is still quite high, realistically. Sure. But when you go across to carnivore, you know, that is almost the status quo. And for most people, that is really, really high. And I think it's actually just the rebalancing of your body changing the enzymes required to increase amino acid oxidation rates that actually kind of produces that lethargy. And then as you kind of like adapt to that, that's when it starts to feel good, because, you know, you do actually have access to the energy in the food that you didn't have previously.
The only thing that I would say with that is the increase in salt helps.
Well, that's actually, I'm really sorry, just on that, you're talking about salts. You know, as you do increase protein, your urea production will go up, so therefore you'll tend to urinate more anyway, which means that if you don't actually compensate with that with even more salt than what you probably would have had on a keto diet, that it actually makes sense that you would kind of deplete that a little bit faster than normal.
Yeah. And the only reason I say they bring that up is because that's one of the common remedies for keto, the keto flu, right, is to eat more salt. So I mean, I think it's definitely, it could definitely play a role. I'm wondering if there's a thermogenesis aspect as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a fascinating question, though.
I mean, yeah. So I could see that.
So anyway, getting back on topic, just because we don't want to blow out into another hour-and-a-half conversation like last time. So
I'm thinking of other stuff now, so sorry.
No, it's all right. This is one of the things I love about chatting with you. Is it's always just like these great questions pop up, and you're like, But so muscle gain on a ancestral diet.
Yes. And no, good.
No, optimize me. How do we optimize muscle gain on an ancestral diet?
I think, again, go back to the first video. I think we talked about it. Lift heavy and eat a lot of protein. Right? Done. Let's close the video. That's it. That's all, guys.
Bye.
I really do. I really think we've covered a lot of what the body needs. And here's why I think lifting heavy for strength gain is more important with high protein than lifting high volume for size is more important for eating for protein from a protein perspective. It's because when you lift for strength, you actually tear down those building blocks of muscle fiber, and you need protein to build them up. When you lift for volume, there is some tear down of that, but it's more about it's more about making the muscle fibers bigger, and that's not a building block function. So if you're trying to get stronger, then you definitely need to have more protein in your system. If you want to get bigger, then you will need more protein than maintenance, but I don't know if it's the same. And I'd love to see if there's somebody, if we could get some kind of a trial. That would be an awesome trial to see people at a certain level of protein intake doing strength training versus, hypertrophy and building size, and then people on a different, and compare how that works with, with different things.
So I think we're on the same page. Reference protein generally within reasonable limits. More is probably better. I think no argument there. I think the two big questions that realistically come up are around carbohydrates, number one, and energy intake, total energy intake. So I've got some thoughts, but I'd love to get yours first. We'll bring this down one at a time. Carbohydrates, specifically about hypertrophy, both sarcoplasmic and myofibular.
I haven't seen anything that makes me think they're required.
Okay, what makes you say that?
The biggest argument you get for building muscle is the insulin responsive carbohydrates, right? What about the insulin responsive protein?
Yeah, right? We could talk about the fact that, glucagon also comes up, and they're kind of antagonistic to each other with protein consumption. But, you raise a good point. If we agree that it's actually calories or, energy consumed, which spikes insulin rather than, a specific macronutrient, then it's kind of like, well, shouldn't there be no major difference?
Yeah, well, the other aspect too, right, is protein is what you build muscle with, okay? Carbohydrates are a fuel that engage a process that can be used to optimize muscle growth.
Yeah.
Okay, so carbs are a fuel. The primary source of carbs in our body is to fuel our body. So when we're eating carbs, it's not like the carbs are saying, hey, let's build muscle, right? The carbs are doing what they do. There's some insulin response because of all the other things that the body needs to do in response to carbs, but not because it's trying to build muscle. When we eat protein, our body goes, oh, I can build muscle.
Yeah, and particularly leucine. I think leucine,
right?
Yeah.
So I just think if you're eating carbs to build muscle, you're kind of, I'm not saying it doesn't work. Don't get me wrong. People build carbs and muscle. They also get fat at the same time.
They do, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because carbs are not made to build muscle. Carbs are meant to fuel our body. So when you're eating a bunch of carbs, building muscle may be a side effect, but that's not what it's for. When you're ancestral and you're trying to build muscle, you're eating fat for fuel and protein for muscle.
Yeah.
End of story. Like, that's what they're for.
So are you familiar with the research that Dr. Lee Norton did? Dr. Lee Norton, PhD, as he likes to tell everyone. Anyway, about the muscle-full effect or protein-full effect.
I've heard, I have not looked at it.
Okay, sure. So you've probably seen the net effect of the research. Essentially, he was working with Dr. Jose Antonio, whose work is amazing and is also the president of the ISSN. And essentially what they were looking at is what was the optimal frequency for protein consumption in order to get the maximum amount of muscle protein synthesis.
We talked about this in the last video. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So what he essentially found was that, it was maximally stimulated at about, 0.25 to 0.42 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass once every 3.5 hours. That's the short answer, right? And I'm actually circling back to carbs in this. The reason being was when leucine is elevated in your blood, right? And the amount of amino acids that is in your blood is also elevated. That sends a trigger to your body to then start a hypertrophy event. Now, with this hypertrophy event, what ends up happening is it actually uses the stored ATP within the cell to then take up the circulating amino acids, uses the energy it already has stored, and then grows, right? Unfortunately, once that ATP is depleted though, right, it then has to stop and then replenish the ATP stores that it has, right? Okay. That takes about, the 3.5 hour to go through that complete cycle, in which case you can then re-trigger it again. So it's actually not the protein per se that is the rate limiting step, or the fact that you need that every 3 hours. It's actually the fact that your cells need to reproduce the ATP. Now, the reason why glucose can be beneficial to muscle gain is because carbohydrates are immediately available into your bloodstream, right, and able to produce ATP, you're able to then replenish the ATP stores in the muscle to a higher degree. And therefore, when you do ingest more protein, then you get more hypertrophy from the same stimulus.
Did they do that? Did they do this study or whatever experiment test? I don't know what it was. Did they do it with fat adapted people?
No, they didn't. So, and that's the difference. And, I'm circling back around to carbohydrate again.
Yeah.
The fact is that when you are fat adapted, you have that constant stream of energy substrate available, whether, that's, ketones or amino acids or something, right? And whilst it might not be quite so high octane, I suppose, which is the nicest thing I could say about having high blood.
I like that you said that because I'm going to use an analogy in a minute.
Exactly. It's higher octane, but that's a separate story. I'll go through your analogy in a second. But
octane actually is the wrong way to say it, but yeah.
Okay. Although the fact is that we still have other substrates, potentially like fat or amino acids, which can be used to replenish the ATP anyway. So the difference between what you might gain out of having glucose in your system versus what you might gain out of being fat adapted, there could be very, very small differences, right? And sure, if you are having glucose, it's a little bit. And if you're only caring about accumulating the absolute most amount of muscle mass, then yes, that little bit probably is relevant to you. In which case, you know what, a higher fat diet, probably not for you. Go eat your carbs. But if you actually care more about your body composition and not looking good, one day out of a year, but looking good year round, chances are an ancestral diet is probably going to be more effective. On top of that, most of us actually do give a fuck about how healthy we are in general.
So, yeah, everything you said, absolutely, right? So, okay, eating carbs builds muscle, great. Okay, eating carbs increases inflammation. It helps you build fat.
Yep.
It leads to so many other things that have nothing to do with your ultimate goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like I said, carbs are not, our bodies are not designed to use carbs to build muscle. They're designed to use carbs to burn fuel. So when we try to do something with carbs for muscle, to me is like trying to screw with a hammer. Right?
It's like you'll do it, but it's not.
Not what it's for. You're going to have a really ginormous hole, and the screw might not even fit by the time you're done with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I look at carbs. I just came up with that one too. So I use the analogy. I was talking to somebody about this a couple nights ago, and I use the analogy of one of two things. You can either look at it like regular gas, right? Fat is the gas in your car, and carbs are the octane booster that you put in your car, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to run your car off of octane booster, right? You're going to get gunk in your engine. You're going to have all kinds of problems, right? Things are not going to work well because it's not meant to be something that you put in that you use only by itself.
Yeah.
Right? It's meant to go with the gas. Now that makes a case, and you can say that maybe makes a case for metabolic flexibility, which I think does have its role in certain people and what their goals are and what they're doing. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Being flexible that way, I think it can be beneficial to some people.
Oh, absolutely. And just even then, just taking into account the fact that, life happens and sometimes you can have a birthday, and being able to have that without having like a diabetic attack is probably a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the thing that people don't get when you use that analogy is it relies on the fact that you have to have a primary fuel source that's not carbs.
Mm-hmm.
If you're using carbs as your booster, that means fat. That means fat has to be your fuel, right? So to be fat adapted, fat is your primary fuel, and then you add carbs in as needed based on situation, intensity, workout goal, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
But building muscle off of a high protein, low fat diet, I think you're going to get the best of strength development, body composition, overall health, and honestly, recovery as well, right? One of the key things I think people miss in their training programs and in what they're eating is the effect that your diet has on your ability to train and how well you recover. So, I was standard-ish paleo, not standard, paleo, keto-ish before I went carnivore. You know, I'm started fitness really heavy in my 40s, you know, when I turned 40. I've been doing carnivore for just over a year. I went from 2.5, 3 days a week of working out to 5 or 6 days of working out on carnivore, right? Because I feel better. I have more energy. I'm not sore as crap after every friggin' workout, right? I've been through a labral tear in my shoulder. I've been through a groin pull. I've been through a torn calf, all on carnivore. And with all of that, the torn calf was right before. With all of that, I am better off now in what I can do, the movements I can perform, the weight that I can lift, the speed I can perform work than I was a year ago. Right? I've healed better. I recover faster. I can do more work. My workout sessions can be longer. I've been able to add things in. It used to be 45 minutes. Like, okay, I'm ready to be done. You know, now it's an hour and a half. I'm like, all right, what's next? It's just changed. It changes everything.
So I do actually just really want to quickly talk about a cyclic ketogenic diet, because I think if you cycling in carbs can actually be very beneficial for growing, but I think it's for the reason that not for the reason that people think. You know, it's actually really great that you explained to everyone before about the difference between the two types of hypertrophy, because I think that's actually one of the major components of why a CKD can work. So when you do cycle carbohydrates, you deplete all your glucose, you then bump up your glucose that forms hypercompensation, right? So you're pushing more glucose into the muscle than what it could normally hold. Now, when you absorb glucose into your muscle, it comes with 4 grams of water for every gram that you store, right? Now, what ends up happening is when you take that volume and you start ramming it into the muscle, it's actually causing stretching between the fibers, right? That stretch can then actually be filled by more fluid, which then, you know, can lead to sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So if people talk about doing pump training, well, that's really how pump training works. You know, we're stretching the distance between the fibers so that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy can occur. And then if there's actually more distance between the muscle fibers, over time there's actually now room for the muscle cells to actually expand in actual size, not in fluid volume, to then take up the difference. You know what I mean? So by shuttling the carbs in, we can actually, it doesn't make you grow specifically, it actually just lowers the barrier for you to be able to continue to keep growing. The second component with cycling in carbohydrates that I think can be beneficial to someone's training, specifically for hypertrophy, is actually about having the amount of stored muscle glycogen that they've actually got. So for the majority of people, and we spoke about this last time, I actually don't think there's any need to cycle in carbohydrates. Your body is more than capable, for the majority of trainees, of making enough glucose to support your training load. But there is a point where I think that if you are training with enough intensity and enough volume specifically, then your body isn't actually able to keep up with the glucose demand. And then therefore there may be a benefit to cycling in some carbohydrates just to kind of like boost up your stored muscle glycogen, you know, once a week, once a fortnight.
Right. It's a booster. It's a booster, right?
Exactly as you mentioned before. You know, so I think what's really important about this is that for the majority of people, that need is never going to exist. You know,
I agree. We're talking like marathon runners, right? People that are training, you know, bodybuilders. I don't know how long your workouts are, but bodybuilders that are working, you know, 3 hours a day on things, like doing just ridiculous sets and reps of things, right? Where they're just completely just depleting their body of everything. I don't work with anybody. None of my clients are there. Right? I don't know anybody who walks in my door that says, I need to get fit and healthy. who's going to have that problem.
100% agree. And I think,
So,
you know, and I mean, I don't want to be, I'm going to piss off some people by saying this, but
never stopped you before.
well, I think I've been quoted as saying on the Meat Life a number of times that, like, when people are arguing with me, it's like, you should post up a selfie because I'm judging your credibility on your physique. I can be kind of arrogant, I'm sorry. I'm actually not, I promise. I think for the majority of people, you know, if you're not realistically sub 15, probably closer to sub 12% body fat for a male, you probably aren't going to get the benefit out of it. And sorry to piss you off here, but if you're not that lean, I doubt that you've actually got the mental fortitude to be able to do a carb up correctly without it actually doing more harm than good. You know what I mean? You haven't yet demonstrated the ability to control your dietary intake enough to actually get the benefit that you need from it.
Yeah. And that's the other thing people talk about, you know, well, I'm not seeing the benefits. I need to add carbs in. Well, are you doing it right without them? So maybe this is a little bullet point we can put on the notes, right? Is your workout what it needs to be for you to reach your goals?
Yep.
Right.
Totally agree. Yep.
Are you resting properly? Because there is a right way and a wrong way to rest. There is a proper amount of rest. If you're not sure what that is, guys, look up maximum recovery or maximal recovery volume, MRV. Right? That's how much work can you do and how long do you need to rest before you can do that same kind of work again.
Yeah.
So training program, are you resting? Are you resting properly? Are you giving yourself the time to adapt so that your body uses the fuel the right way? And then if you have all of that stuff in place and you're still not seeing progress, then maybe you can say, let's look at carbs.
Yeah, totally. And if we were to sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I doubt anybody's going to get through all of that and not see progress.
100%. You know, and if we prioritize down through.
Fifth one, eat more protein.
I was going to say, if we actually place them in a priority list, I'd say that, is your training intense enough? If not, let's start there. You know, you're wasting your time asking any other questions first. Yep. Are you progressing in the gym in terms of increasing your strength over time? Are you recovering enough? In this order, are you recovering enough? Are you then eating enough protein? Is your total energy intake sufficient to your output? And then finally, maybe consider bumping up your glycogen stores through some strategic use of carbohydrates.
I would say even before that last one, have you given your body enough time to adapt?
Yeah, totally agree. Oh, it's been 3 days. Why aren't I jacked yet?
Yeah, right. or hey, I just started this thing. I want to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I want to do this. Which one, you know? No, one thing at a time, guys.
Yeah.
One thing at a time. Give it some time, see what it does, then try something else.
Perfect. Hey, I know it's quite late for you, so I'm going to let you go. But I did just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for your time. It's always an absolute pleasure chatting to you. What I really liked out of our chat today was, you know, your focus, what we were talking before about how to be specific in your training without being specific in the only modality. I really got something out of that, and I think I certainly hope a lot of our listeners did too. So again, thank you very much for your time, Keith. It's always a pleasure.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, talk soon.
See ya.
Bye-bye.